Hi, welcome. So in the previous video, we implemented the block, right? The block is a way we use to divide our storage device into different sections since we are implementing the file system in the non-contiguous fashion. So in this video, we're going to be implementing the file, and the file it will serve more like a file consists of blocks. So the file will be like our access to the file system itself. So think about it. The file is just more like a series of blocks come together to make one file. So let's go through our diagrams here. So this is a file. This block here, or this section, this rectangle here is the file. This red means it's like the file name. Then this is the starting block. So in many ways, the file can be seen more like the head of the linked list, because from this it's pointing to the block which contains the data. Then that block is also doing the exact same thing. So all what a file needs to have is just its name, metadata, and the block it's pointing to, and that's all. So from there we're just able to when we store things as a file, we're just storing a bunch of blocks, and when we want to retrieve it, all we just need to know is where is the starting block, and from the starting block we can get subsequent blocks. Okay, so let's begin implementing it. So the very first thing that we need to implement is we need a way that, because whenever you store files in your operating system or in your computer, you always have information. You have information of when it was created, when you last accessed it, when it was just information in general, and that's the metadata. So first of all, let's implement the concept of metadata. So I'll create a data class and call that data class metadata, and that metadata will consist of the file size. So it's very important. You're storing a file in your file system. You want to know what the file size will be. The next will be when was it created, which is very important. You want to know when your file was created. And the last modified, when was it last modified, like when last was it tampered with, so you can just useful informations. And the last accessed, so this is like when was it last accessed, which is, I guess, last modified is okay, you adjusted it. Then last access is when last did you sort of like open it. So these are useful informations that are good and for us to keep. So right now I'm getting the squiggly lines because of I'm using the datetime module in Python to keep track of the time. So I think I'll just sort of like import it, so we're all good now. So now let's implement the file itself, like the actual file. So the file will be a data class too. Like again, I love data classes because with data classes there is no need to, we just define the properties of our class and Python does the rest. So we define we create the file class, and the file will have its name, just like over, let me move this picture here. Just like here, we can think of this red as a file name. It will have the starting block, that's the block, this is this block here, which is 7. And it will have metadata. So a file has its own metadata. So in many ways, the file is making reference to this metadata up here. Then what we need to implement next is just a method that can give us the information about the file. That's to get the metadata itself. So first of all, we can basically say, hey, what's the file size? So we can imagine this get metadata function as when you're trying to like get information about the file. So from the metadata we can get the file size. From the get metadata method we can get the file size. We can get when it was last accessed, when it was last modified, and when it was created. So this is basically our file in general, our file implementation, and plus its metadata. So let's just quickly test this out, right? So let me open my terminal over here and get a IPython shell. Okay, so first of all, let's import. So from main, the file that I created, we import block, and then we import file. So in the previous video, we established the whole idea of, like, blocks. And so first of all, we create a block. The block has so basically this is the block. Let me quickly open this picture. So this is the block here, right? So this is one block, this is another block, this is another block. So let's create one. Okay, let's call this block, let's just call it A. So this is one block, and we create a different block, and this other block is let me just adjust the starting, or let me just leave it this way for now. So this block is pointing to the B block is pointing to the A block, right? So now we have a block. So we can just imagine, currently there is no data stored in the block. We can just imagine that these blocks all contain data, but they're all separate, right? They are pointing to each other, but how do we, the user, get that? So that's when we need the whole idea of a file. But before we actually create the file, let's create the metadata, right? And so the metadata will, okay, I didn't actually import metadata, so let me also import metadata. From main, import metadata. Okay, so let's create a metadata. Let me just call it metadata. Okay. Oh, I'm also realizing that I also probably want to import date time, so we can use it for our time. From dates time imports dates time. Okay, so first of all, it will have the file size. Let's just give it a random number now. Let's see, since we have 2 blocks, let's just say it's 2. Doesn't really mean much now. When was it created? Let's say date time dot now. And so imagine when you create a file for the very first time, the last modified will also be date time dot now. The last accessed will also be date time dot now. So it's just basically be the same data. Oh, I call this data time. Oh yeah, my mistake. Okay, so that works. So another cool thing about data classes, it gives us a good visualization, so we can see our data, the file size, the created, the last modified, and the last accessed. So the next thing we need to do is create our file. So our file, let me just scroll up a bit below here. Okay, so our file has its name, so let's call our file name equals file. The starting block, so the starting block will be the B block over here that we created, this, right? So it will be this block over this, the B block, which is also pointing to the A block. So that will be our file. Then the metadata will actually just be, or let me call this start block, so we don't get any errors in Python. Okay, so we also create the metadata is equals to metadata. Okay, and here we go, we have our block, our file actually. So basically the file is, its starting block is the B block, you can see right here, Then the B block's next block is the A block. So we can also see this within the data itself. We can also see this within the data. Then it also has its metadata, all of the useful informations of the file. And from this, we have a file. And this is actually how files are implemented in most operating system, probably what you use in this non-contiguous fashion, where a file consists just of a bunch of separated blocks that are all linked together in one fashion or the other. And in this case, we're using a linked list. So in the next video, we'll finally implement the actual file system, which will be more like an interface to this. Like the file system will manage files, it will interact with the storage, it will create new blocks and everything. Right now we did this manually, but it will be the file system's job to get all of this done. So thank you very much. If you found this video very interesting, like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for the next video.